Chapter 21 Compromised. More than 2 years after Loriana Burcho gave DNA approval to the Thunderhit secret undertaking, and a year after Westmerica officially aligned with Midmerica, Scythe Sidney Pozuelo shot across the breakfast table from Scythe Anesthesia, trying to bring her up to speed on the state of the world. The more she heard, the more diminished her appetite became. Anesthesia was not ready to face a world where Goddard was the prevailing power over an entire continent. While we in Amazonia have been resisting him, Pozuelo told her, some other South American regions are joining with him, and now I hear he's making serious overtures to Venetia. Pozuelo wiped a spot of egg yolk from his mouth, and Citra wondered how he could have an appetite. The best he could do was move food around her plate in an attempt to be gracious. She supposed it must always be this way. Once the unthinkable settles into being the norm, you become numb to it. She never wanted to be the numb. What does he want that he doesn't already have? She asked. He's gotten rid of the cleaning quota, so that should satisfy his lust for killing, and now he's in control of 5 North American regions instead of just 1. That should be enough for anyone. Pozuelo offered her a patronizing smile that she found infuriating. Your naivety is refreshing, Anastasia, but the truth is power for power's sake is a consuming addiction. He would devour the world whole and still be unsatisfied. There's got to be a way to stop him. Pozuelo smiled again. This time it wasn't patronizing. It was conspiratorial. She liked that a whole lot better. That's where you come in. The return of Scythe Anesthesia from the dead will gain people's attention, he said. It might even breathe life back into the splintered and demoralized old guard. Then maybe we'll be able to fight him. Citra sighed and shifted her shoulders uncomfortably. Do people, ordinary people, accept the changes Goddard's brought? For most people, Scythe business is a mystery. Their only desire is to stay out of the way and avoid being linked. But they've got to see what's happening and what he's doing. They do, and among the masses, he is feared, but he's also respected. What about his mass cleanings? I'm sure he's doing even more of those. Doesn't that bother people? Pozuelo deflated at the thought. He chooses his mass cleanings carefully, only selecting unregistered and protected groups that the population at large doesn't mind seeing linked. Citra looked down at her uneaten foot. She fought the urge to hurl it against the wall, just for the satisfaction of hearing the blade shatter. Targeted cleanings were not something new in history. In the past, however, they were quickly punished by one's high blade. But when the highest authority was the perpetrator, who was there to stop it? Rohan was the only one who dealt death to power, and it wasn't likely that Pozuelo would allow him to continue doing so. Goddard would find more and more vulnerable populations to target, and as long as enough people accepted it, he'd get away with it. The news isn't as dismal as it seems, Pozuelo told her. If it's of any consolation to you, we here in Amazonia still hold to the spirit of the Scythe commandments, as do many other Scythums. We estimate that half the world, maybe more, is against Goddard's ideas and methods. Even within regions he controls, there are those who would resist him if they could. If you can believe it, Townies are proving to be a substantial source of resistance ever since their prophet was claimed. Prophet? There are those who believe the Thunderhead still spoke to him, but what does it matter now? So Goddard had everything in his favor. It was what Marie had feared, what they all had feared, what Scythe Asimov had called the worst of all possible worlds. Now Marie was gone, and hope was at a premium. As she thought of Scythecore, she felt emotions erupt in her that she'd kept down until now. Marie's last act had been to save Citra and Rowan, a truly selfless act worthy of one of the noblest post-mortals who ever lived. And now she was gone. Yes, it was years ago, but for Citra the grief was still raw and bleeding. She turned away from Pozuelo to wipe her tears, but found that the moment she did, those tears exploded into sobs that she couldn't hope to control. Pozuelo came around the table to comfort her. She then wanted, didn't want him to see her this way, but she also knew the pain was not something she had to bear alone. "It's all right, me want you," Pozuelo said, his voice soothing and paternal. "As you said, hope is merely misplaced, and I believe you're the one to find it." "Me want you?" she said. "Sydney, I'm nobody's angel." But you are," Pozuelo said. "Because an angel is what the world needs if we are to ever bring Other down." Citra let her grief fall. Then, when she felt spent, she wrangled her sorrow back in, wiping her tears. She needed this moment, needed to say her goodbye to Marie. And now that she had, she felt just a little bit different. She felt, for the first time since her revival, less like Citra Terranova and more like Size Anesthesia. 2 days later, she was moved from the revival center to a more secure location, which turned out to be an old fortress on the easternmost shore of Amazonia, a place that was desolate and yet beautiful in its desolation. It was like being in a castle on the face of the moon, if the moon had been blessed with oceans. Modern amenities juxtaposed with ancient stone bulwarks made the place both comfortable and intimidating at once. Her suite had a bed fit for a queen. Pozuelo had let it slip that Rowan was also here, although he probably wasn't being given quite the same royal treatment. "How is he?" she asked Pozuelo, trying to sound less concerned than she was. Pozuelo visited her daily and spent considerable time with her, continuing to brief her on the state of the world, informing her bit by bit of the many things that had changed since Endura. "Rowan is being suitably cared for," Pozuelo told her. "I have seen to it personally. But he's not here with us, which means you still see him as a criminal." "The world sees him as a criminal," Pozuelo said. "How I see him doesn't matter." "It matters to me." Pozuelo took his time in answering. "Your assessment of Rowan Demisk is clearly blurred by love, me want you, and therefore not entirely reliable. However, it is not entirely unreliable either." She was given free run of the fortress, as long as she had an escort everywhere she went. She explored with the pretext of curiosity, but really she was just looking for Rowan. One of her escorts was an annoying junior scythe by the name of Peixoto, who was so starstruck by her, she feared he might just burst into flames if he as much as touched her rope. As she moved through a dung space that must have been an ancient communal hall, she had to say something, because he just stood there by the stone steps, gawking at every move she made. "You can put your eyes back in your head now," she told him. "I'm sorry, Your Honor. It's just still hard to believe that I'm laying eyes on the actual Scythe Anesthesia," Peixoto said. "Well, laying eyes on me doesn't necessarily mean popping them out of their sockets first. I'm sorry, Your Honor. It won't happen again." "It's still happening." "I'm sorry." Now Peixoto cast his eyes down as if looking at her was like gazing at the sun. It was almost as bad as disturbing. Was this the kind of ridiculous treatment she'd have to deal with? It was bad enough when she was just a scythe. Now she was also a living legend, which apparently came with a brand new bag of nauseating veneration. "If you don't mind me asking," Peixoto said as they spiraled up a narrow stairwell that led, like so many others, nowhere. "What was it like? You'll have to be more specific." "To be there for the sinking of Endura," he said. "To watch it go down." "Sorry, but I was too busy trying to survive to take pictures," she said, more than a little annoyed by the question. "Forgive me," he said. "I was only an apprentice when it happened. Since then, Endura has fascinated me. I have spoken with several survivors, one who made it out by boat or plane in those last minutes. They say it was spectacular. Endura was a very impressive place." Anastasia had to admit. "No, I meant the sinking. I hear the sinking was spectacular." Anastasia didn't even know what to say to that, so she answered with silence. And when she next saw Pozuelo, she asked if Peixoto could be assigned elsewhere. After a week at the old fortress, things took a sudden and unexpected turn. In the middle of the night, Pozuelo came into Anastasia's chambers with several blade guards to wake her out of yet another dreamless sleep. "Dress quickly. We must leave in extreme haste," he said. "I'll be hasty in the morning," she told him, annoyed at having been woken, and too blurry to grasp the seriousness of the situation. "We've been compromised," Pozuelo told her. "A delegation of Scythes has arrived from North America, and I assure you, they are not here to welcome you back to the world." It was more than enough to get her out of bed. Who would have told? But even before she formed the question, she knew the answer. "Scythe Peixoto! You were far more intuitive than I when it came to that desgraciado. I should have seen his intentions. You're a trusting man. I am a fool." After she slipped on her robe, she noticed someone in the room she hadn't seen upon waking. At first she thought the individual was a man, but as the figure stepped into the light, Anastasia realized that the visitor was a woman. Or not. Each moment, each shift of the light, changed the impression. "Anastasia, this is Yoriko Sobranis, the captain of the salvage ship that found you. Yoriko will get you to safety." "And what about Rowan?" Saito asked. "I'll do what I can for him, but now you must go." Rowan was awakened by the sound of his lock turning. It was still dark outside. This was not part of his routine. The moon shone through the slit in the stone, casting a strip of light low against a far wall. When he had gone to sleep, the moon had not yet risen, and by the angle of the light increased, he suspected it must be just before dawn. He feigned sleep as figures quietly filed into the room. The hallway they had entered from was dark, and they had only narrow beams of flashlights to guide them. Rowan had the advantage of eyes that were already adjusted to the dark. They, however, had the advantage of numbers. He remained still, keeping his eyes open to the narrowest slit, just enough to see the figures through his eyelashes. It was a cast of unknown characters, but not entirely unknown. The first indication that they were interlopers was the darkness, and the fact that one seemed to be searching for a light switch. Whoever they were, they clearly didn't know that the light in his room, and probably the hallway as well, was controlled remotely from some other location in the fortress. Then he caught the glint of the ceremonial dagger that members of the Blade Guard wore on their belts. But most telling were two robed figures, and the fact that the robes were speckled with gems that glittered in the moonlight like stars. "Wake him," said one of the Scythes. Her voice was unfamiliar, but that didn't matter. The jewels on her robe meant that she was a New Order Scythe, a follower of Goddard, and that made her, and everyone in her company, the enemy. As a guard leaned over him, preparing to slap him awake, Rowan reached out and grabbed the ceremonial dagger from the guard's waist. He didn't use it against the guard, because no one would care much if a guard was surrendered to this. Instead, Rowan turned the blade on the nearest jewel-laden Scythe, not the woman who had spoken, but the one foolish enough to leave himself in striking distance. Rowan severed his jugular in a single swing of the blade, then bolted for the door. It worked. The scythe wailed and flayed and gushed, creating an impressive distraction. All those present were instantly flustered and unsure whether to go after Rowan or to assist the dying scythe. This, Rowan knew, was a fight for his life. The world saw him as the beast who sunk under. He had been told very little about how things had changed while he and Citra were at the bottom of the sea, but he knew that much. His alleged villainy had been drilled into humanity's collective consciousness, and there was no hope of changing that. For all he knew, even the Thunderhead believed it. His only option was to escape. As he raced down the hallway, the lights came on, which would seize his pursuers as much as it would him. He had never been out of his cell, so he had no way of knowing the layout of the ancient fortress, which was not designed for escape. If anything, it was a maze designed to confront anyone trapped within it. The effort to capture him was disorganized and haphazard, but if they had managed to turn on the lights, that probably meant they had access to the security cameras and at least a rudimentary knowledge of the fortress's layout. The first few guards and scythes he encountered were easily dispatched. Scythes, while well-trained for combat, rarely had to face aggressors as skilled in killcraft as Rowan. As for blade guards, they were, much like their daggers, Decorative. These ancient stone walls that had not seen blood for countless centuries were well fed today. Had this been an ordinary structure, escape would have been much easier for Rowan, but Rowan was constantly finding himself at dead-end hallways. And what of Sidra? Was she already in their grip? Would these sights treat her any better than they treated him? Maybe she was running through these passages too. Maybe he would find her, and they could escape together. It was that thought that propelled him and fueled him, driving him faster through the stone labyrinth. After the fourth winding dead end, he doubled back to find his path blocked by more than a dozen guards on sides. He tried to fight his way through them, but as much as he would have liked to believe that Scythe Lucifer was invincible, Rowan Damisk was not. The dagger was pulled from his hand, and he was apprehended, forced to the floor, and his hands were circled by a metallic restraining device too absurdly offensive to be anything but a relic of the Mortal Age. Once he was in hand, a Scythe approached. "Turn him to face me," she ordered. She was the one who had first spoken in his cell, the one in charge of this operation. He only faintly recognized her. She wasn't one of the American Scythes, but Rowan knew he had seen her face before. "All those who you so busily render dead here shall be revived." She was so full of fury and rancor. Spittle flew from her mouth as she spoke. "They shall be revived and stand witness against you." "If I had meant to end them permanently," Rowan said, "I would have." "Nevertheless, your crimes today have earned you death many times over." "You mean in addition to the deaths I've already earned?" "Sorry, but they all begin to blur together." It only served to infuriate her more, as was his intention. "Not just death," she told him, "but pain, extreme pain, which has been approved by the North American Overblade under certain circumstances. And your circumstances warrant a great deal of punitive suffering." It wasn't the mention of pain that troubled him, but the idea of a North American Overblade. "Render him deathy so that he gives us no more trouble," she ordered one of the guards. "We'll revive him later." "Yes, Your Excellency." "Excellency?" Rowan said. Only High Blades were referred to that way. Then it finally occurred to him who she was. "High Blade Pickford of West America?" he said, incredulous. "Does Goddard control your region too?" The redness of her furious face gave him his answer. "I wish I didn't have to revive you at all," Pickford spat. "But that's not my decisions to make." Then she turned to the guards holding him. "Make it bloodless. There's more than enough mess today." Then one of the guards crushed his windpipe, delivering Rowan one more in a long line of unpleasant deaths. Scythe Pozuelo unsheathed his blade the moment he saw Scythes who were not wearing the traditional green of the Amazonian Scythedom. Never mind that scythe-on-scythe violence was forbidden. It would be worth whatever punishment he might receive. But when the High Blade of West America appeared behind the other Scythes, he thought better of it. He quickly sheathed his blade, but kept his tongue sharp. "By whose authority do you violate the jurisdiction of the Amazonian Scythedom?" he demanded. "We need no permission to apprehend a global criminal," said High Blade Pickford, wielding her voice just as powerful as any blade. "On whose authority were you protecting him?" "We were detaining him, not protecting him." "So you say? Well, he's not your concern anymore," she told him. "An ammo drone under our control has already carried him to our plane." "There will be consequences if you proceed with this action," Pozuelo threatened. "I assure you." "I couldn't care less," Pickford said. "Where is Scythe Anesthesia?" "She's no criminal." "Where is she?" "Not here," Pozuelo finally told her. And then from the shadows came that weasel Peixoto, who had clearly sold them out to gain Goddard's favor. "He's lying," said Peixoto. "They're keeping her in a room at the end of this corridor." "Search all you want," said Pozuelo, "but you won't find her. She's long gone." Pickford motioned to the other sides, and blade guards in her company to search. They flooded past Pozuelo, peering into every room and niche they passed. He allowed it, because he knew they'd find nothing. "I've already notified my High Blade of this intrusion," Pozuelo said, "and a new edict has just been given. Any North American scythe caught on Amazonian territory shall be captured and forced to self-clean. You wouldn't dare. I suggest you leave before reinforcements arrive to carry out the edict, and be so kind as to let your so-called overblade know that neither he nor any puppet scythe working on his behalf is welcome in Amazonia. Pickford indignantly stared him down, but he did not yield. Finally, her cold facade seemed to give way. Now Pozuelo had a glimpse of what was truly beneath it. She was tired, defeated. Very well, she said, but believe me, if Goddard is determined to find her, he will. Her entourage returned, unsuccessful in their search, and she ordered them to leave. But Pozuelo was not ready to let her go yet. What happened to you, Mary? He asked, and the honest disappointment in his voice was hard for her to ignore. Just last year, didn't you say that you would never surrender your sovereignty to Goddard? And now look at you. Him is far from home doing his bidding. You used to be an honorable woman, Marie, a good scythe. I still am a good scythe, she said. But times have changed, and if we don't change with them, we'll be trampled by what's coming. You can take that to your high blade. Then she cast her eyes down, withdrawing into herself for a moment. Too many French in the West American Scythedom chose to clean themselves rather than to submit to Goddard's new order. They saw it as courageous defiance. I see it as weakness. I vowed never to be so weak. Then she turned and strode out, the long train of her sheer silk robe too weighed down with opals to flow gracefully behind her, as it once did. Now it just dragged on the ground. Only after Pickford was gone did Pozuelo dare relax. Word had come that Anestesian Captain Soberanis had made it to the port, and the Spence was running dark into the Atlantic, just as it had the night it brought the bolt up from the depths. The good captain was resourceful and trustworthy. Pozuelo had faith that Jericho would successfully spirit Anastasia across the sea to friends who might keep her safer than he'd been able to. As for the boy, no doubt Pickford would bring him to Goddard. Pozuelo's feelings were mixed. He wasn't sure if he believed Anastasia's claims that Rowan was innocent. Even if he hadn't sunk Endura, he'd ended more than a dozen sites, and whether those sites deserved it to be ended was irrelevant. Mortal age vigilantism had no place in the world. All sides would agree on that, which meant that, regardless of philosophy, there wasn't a Highblade in the world who would allow him to live. It was, Pozuelo decided, a mistake to have revived him at all. He should have put the boy back in that vault and returned to the deep, because now Roman Damisk would be toyed with by the Overblade without the slightest bit of mercy. A Testament of the Toll. In an ancient abbey on the northern edge of the city, the toll did take sanctuary and sustenance. He shared bread and fellowship with the believer, the magician, and the mauler, for all were of equal timbre to the toll. Thus, all souls, high and low, came to revere him as he sat in the cradle of the great fork in the springtime of his life, imparting wisdom and prophecy. He would never know winter, for the sun cast its countenance more brightly upon him than on anyone. All rejoice. Commentary of Great Symphonious. Here is the initial reference to what we call the first chord. Believer, magician, and mauler are the three archetypes that constitute humankind. Only the toll could have united such disparate voices into a coherent sound pleasing to the tone. This is also the first mention of the Great Fork, which has been determined to be a symbolic reference to the two paths one may choose in life, the path of harmony or the path of discord. And to this day, the toll still stands where the paths diverge, beckoning us toward everlasting harmony. Code's analysis of Symphonious. Once again, Symphonious has made broad assumptions that stretch the facts. While it is possible that the notes of the first chord represent archetypes, it is equally possible that they represent three actual individuals. Perhaps the magician was a court entertainer. Perhaps the mauler was a knight who took on the fire-breathing beasts that are rumored to have existed at the time. But most egregious, in my opinion, is that Symphonious missed that the toll sitting in the cradle of the Great Fork in the springtime of his life is an obvious fertility reference.